Okay, we're on.
I was thinking it was Senator Adams that did that for some reason.
Welcome to our media briefing and public access. We encourage those who are watching on the internet to send in their questions. We hope everyone had a great weekend and enjoyed some great weather, but we're hoping that we have a little bit of winter here in the next little while. We're going to need some snow, and that's just not for skiing. That's we need that for our drinking and our agricultural purposes. So we'll go right into questions. Questions from the media?
You're meeting tomorrow on Medicaid for a couple hours in caucus, is that right?
That is correct.
Do you expect to have a Senate majority position after that meeting tomorrow or sometime this week?
Two bills will be presented tomorrow. That's Senator Christensen's bill and Senator Shizawa's, and we'll debate the merits of each of those. It's hard to predict what the outcome will be for that hour and a half that we spend in caucus. We may need some additional time, so it's a big issue for us. It's one of the biggest issues we face this session. We want to make sure we have enough time in caucus to really get all the questions answered. And so if it's quick, there's not a lot of questions, maybe it'll be a favor, but otherwise we'll be looking probably to another caucus meeting to finalize it.
But not with the House?
We left that kind of open to the caucus after our meeting tomorrow, and we'll probably know further whether we want to meet in a joint caucus with the House. We wanted to have our caucus on Medicaid first. No questions?
The House is debating the clean fuel school buses bill. Where's the Senate's take on that?
Well, the Senate was in favor of the bill that Senator Adams passed last year, or was it the year before? Where we wanted to get the buses converted. So it is going to be a fiscal note issue in the end, but we're in favor of giving incentives to converting buses to natural gas. It will help our air.
What about the $20 million allocation toward converting those school buses?
Senator Hilliard?
It'll all be sorted out as we finally figure out exactly how much revenue we have. We hope to know that on the 18th of February, and then the allocations. And the Education Committee is going to have to make some decisions too. They may decide with other items of higher priority. We'll listen to their recommendations.
Any questions from the public?
Let me just take a minute, if I could, about what we're going to do today on base budgets. So you understand that the base budgets today introduced up on our board are basically 98% of what the committee spent last year. So that's all built in and approved in the budget. The committees, now as they further study, they can go back in that and say, we now have looked at some of the priorities of the state, and we think there are things already built in the base that ought to be reallocated and used up again. So it's not absolutely solid as any budget. It will be subject to further review. Then every committee, except for higher ed, and there was an issue in there about how they did their allocation, received back the money that they had identified as potential cuts. Now I think we saw there are a number of them that absolutely will be refunded back in the base budget. I think we're honored the committee's hard work in making some very difficult choices, but we realize when they look at how they're going to reallocate this money, they're going to put it back in. And so everybody except higher ed will end up with exactly the same amount of money they had last year, except higher public ed got an extra $54 million, which is basically to fund their growth for this year. So that's taken care of now. The key will now, the committees will be looking at this money that's been reallocated back to them that they themselves found, and they'll make recommendations to executive appropriations how this money ought to be spent, whether it ought to be put right back where they took it from, whether there ought to be some adjustments and issues. And then they also prepare a building block list and say, if we have extra money and you give, say, public ed another $100 million, how would you recommend that we spend it? And they may say all in the WPU, or they may have other issues. They'll make their recommendations. My experience has been, we had $325 million to start with ongoing. We just took 54 out for the growth in public education. We've also taken out 18 million that were required by statute for the tourism marketing. We've also taken out $12 million for a glip in our pay salary to make sure that that's fully funded. And so we have that taken out. We have also put on the table the question about the governor wanting to move $92 million out of highways over to general funds. That's part of the governor's budget. We have not done that, nor am I really aware of a bill to do that that's been introduced. If there is, I don't know about it. And then there's also the question that we've raised about bubbles, about whether this new revenue represents something that's sustainable or whether it's just a blip and it'll just come up and down. So we're holding that money out to look at as well. So when I say all of that, I would anticipate that assuming we have, I'm going to guess $200 million new of ongoing revenue, plus whatever may come on November the 18th, we're going to have requests probably from $800 to $1 billion. So that's what we now have to judge against, what limited money we have, how many of these priorities, how far can we actually fund in the committees. Traditionally, we've given a great deal of weight to the committee. So if the committee comes back, for example, public ed, and says their number one priority is WPU, then I'm sure that's going to have a high clout with us. If number 40th on the list is something else, we won't make it down to 40th. So those are items we have to do. So the process, we hope to have the appropriations work all done this weekend by this Friday. Then we'll be ready a week from Wednesday, when the new revenues are, to go back and start working and see where we end up in the funding by each committee.
So if I understand correctly, then higher ed's not going to get that 2% back, and they're going to take a 2% cut?
No, that's not it. We just have not made the allocation currently. We always can, and I suspect that we will. The question just in the process, they did not identify specifically the cuts as we'd ask every committee to do. So executive appropriations, as we talked about, it felt like rather than just allocate the money back right now, we're going to see where they end up doing their budgets. I really don't.
Is that kind of a punishment for them for not doing it the way that you asked them to do it?
You know, my kids always called that punishment. I always called it a teaching lesson, but there's a difference in what you call it. I don't think it's a punishment. I think it's an issue we need to look. And again, there's some uniqueness about higher education and how they do their budgets. There's some, but again, I think all of us agree that every agency in the state can take a look about how they can be more effective and use the money more effectively for their programs. And like it or not, that's really our challenge as a legislature, to try to do that in a very, very short time period.
Anything else?
I just add this. My wife said the other night, she said, I can't remember a time that you were so busy the first 2 weeks on budgets, except in times when we knew we were short and we're going to have to do some dramatic cuts. And I think it's just been the process, because we know, or at least we expect to have additional money. But I just have had a number of legislators come and say thank you. It's a chance really to get in depth in budgets that we've really probably never done before in a climate that we think we can make some differences when we come back and do our final budgets.
The reprioritization of those funds is a great thing. It's good that we give that opportunity, and I think some good things will come of that this year. All right, if there's no other questions, thank you for listening in, and thanks for the media and their participation today.